Hello guys, it's Ryan Ho back with another video. Today I want to talk about the Truthear X Crinacle Zero. Now this headphone has two drivers, one to play the sub bass, one to play the mids and the highs. And because it has two ways to play the bass, it sounds really, really good because it kind of has a dedicated subwoofer essentially, and I don't really think you hear much of that at this price point of $50, so I think that's the one thing that stand out. And then you also get a nice kind of emphasis in the treble. So I would overall call this headphone pretty V-shaped. So we have a few of these IEMs on the table that I'll compare it to. Some are way more expensive, some are cheaper. So go through that and then we'll talk about the kind of other things it has in more detail. So let's talk about the Truthear Crinacle. So aesthetic wise, I think it looks really cool. I think the shell looks really nice with its kind of different colors that it kind of exhibits, and then it kind of sheens different ways. I feel like this is reminiscent of a more expensive type of shell that you would get from more expensive products. So I really enjoyed that part. It's all plastic. So this is plastic, this is plastic. So that gives it a lightweight. But you know, some people might like metal better, but I find that the plastic really makes it comfortable in the weight department, right? So the tips right here are, I think the head, the kind of the hole right here is kind of big. So overall, it kind of is a larger fit in your ear. So it might not be as more comfortable than like the Moondrop Aria Snow Edition. And I think the tips right here also kind of silicone. I think if you add the kind of tips from the Moondrop Aria, like I said, on there, the tips feel more comfortable if you kind of substitute out. But I would say the comfort is simply okay. It doesn't fit as well as the Moondrop Aria, but doesn't mean it's bad. I think it fits, but it's a little bit larger fit, just for people to know. And then of course we got the cable. It's a nice black cable. I like black simple cables, I guess. It's really cool, and it terminates into a 3.5 millimeter. So yeah, it's a fine cable. So you can see all the ear tips it comes with. So you can see there's a multitude of sides, and there are also these kind of form-fitting ones that are in here, as well as these black ones. And yeah, you have a lot of options to choose from. The next thing I want to talk about is the bag it comes with, right? So it has this bag, pretty standard. It feels like, you know, faux leather. It feels really nice, so you can keep your stuff in here and kind of safe if you're traveling with it. So it's just a nice addition that they include in the box. So the question really is, how does this sound, right? So I would really say this is, you know, supposedly tuned like Harman, but when I listen to it, it sounds pretty V-shaped to me. Essentially, the sub bass and bass is kind of lifted. There's not as much kind of like mid bass around, like I guess what people call 200 hertz. So sometimes the explosions don't hit as hard as the deepest sub basses in my opinion, but it sounds really good. Like I think no one's going to be like, wow, this doesn't have any bass. This thing has a lot of bass and it sounds really good. It's very consumer kind of tuned in that sense. The mid-range sounds really good. Male, female vocalists sound really good in the mid-range. So when it comes to treble, it sounds really good. It is slightly overemphasized, so you know, I still think it gives a nice detail. And you know, it's slightly over sharpened, but you know, you can actually fix that with by changing the tips on this a little bit, and it will kind of tame the treble a little bit. But honestly, it gives a nice kind of top end on top of that. And I would say, yeah, it's just, you know, slightly over exaggerated. So the other tip I tried this with was with this Moondrop Chu. The Moondrop Chu comes with these spring tips, and these spring tips honestly sound really, really good on the Truthear. They basically tame the treble and give it more bass, so it sounds really fun. And you know, it doesn't sound like the treble is kind of overemphasized. It sounds much more closer to neutral in my opinion. So yeah, this cost is like, you know, 50, and the tip costs like 20. So I'm not sure if everyone's gonna have, you know, to buy both of them, but you know, I at least tried it, and it does like help the tuning a little bit, right? So when it comes to kind of soundstage and imaging, I do think this has a pretty good big soundstage. If you look at the nozzle, it's pretty big. And because of that nozzle size, it really kind of helps the soundstage really well, in my opinion. It sounds big and wide, wider than most things I've heard at this price point, and even more expensive. So it does really well in that sense. Now, when it comes to imaging, I know a lot of people are saying this is like really good for gaming. I would definitely agree. So however, I think the imaging, in my opinion, so I always play like deathmatch in games and try to kind of get a sense of like, how's it the directionality, if it's like in the middle, is it to the side? For this one, I would say, you know, things don't sound exactly in the center. They sound a little off center. So I would say like, you know, maybe 15 degrees, a little bit to the left. So it does sound pretty close to center, and I have no issues with it gaming. I'm also now Ascendant 3 in Valorant, so I'm top like 3%, so I can definitely tell you that it images really well. So if you want something to play games with, this works. Now, I obviously tried things that, image even better. This right here is the Moondrop variations. I think this one does image better. It kind of sounds like things are in the center, actually. For me, it's probably the best one I've heard, but it's $500, so it's 10 times the price. Is it really worth, paying 10 times the price for it? Probably not. But if you're curious for the best one I've heard, it's probably this one. So let's do some comparisons. So I'll have a lot of them on the table, but essentially for me, the Truthears comparing to the Moondrop Chus right here, the Moondrop Chus are a little cheaper. They're $20, honestly. The Moondrop Chu actually has a better treble kind of tuning, in my opinion. It doesn't sound overly sharp. I feel like the Truthear kind of aims to be what the Moondrop Chu sounds like in the treble, but it just doesn't get there. So if you want a really nice kind of treble presentation, I would definitely go with the Moondrop Chus. I feel like these have a very natural presentation. However, the one thing that the Moondrop Chu can't compare to against the Truthear is definitely the bass. The bass response on this is just much more punchy, thumpy, and much more exaggerated than the Chus. So the Chus definitely fall behind in that sense. But for the rest of frequency, I do think if you like the vocal range, this does sound really, really good. Now we have the Dunu Titan S over here. Dunu Titan S, in my opinion, doesn't sound that good compared to the Truthear. The Truthear has way better bass, in my opinion. The treble and the mid-range performance is pretty similar, though. Honestly, they both have exaggeration there, and they do kind of compare similarly, but the Dunu Titan S is like $80, so I honestly would just recommend you going for the Truthear, in my opinion. Then we have the Moondrop Blessing 2. The Moondrop Blessing 2 is definitely a level up from the Truthear, but it's not a one-to-one. It definitely has more detail. It has 5 drivers in here, and they're all BA's drivers. So the Blessing 2 is definitely a more detailed type of sound. However, in some senses, the Blessing 2 isn't as good as the Truthear in the kind of bass and sub bass. The Blessing 2 just doesn't have the same amount of quantity of bass, nor the deep sub bass, nor the impact of the Truthear. So in a sense, this kind of $50 IEM does perform better in that one region. So if you're interested in that, then maybe the Truthear is for you. Well, obviously the Blessing 2 is also like $300 and the Truthear is like $50. Now, a straight up upgrade in basically every way, I would say, is the Moondrop variations, right? Obviously, this thing is kind of ridiculously expensive. It is, $520. So yeah, it is much more expensive, but it kind of shows you what true kind of bass and sub bass kind of high detail sounds like. Like, essentially, it does everything that the Truthear Crinacle does, but much cleaner, much more higher resolution, in my opinion. And the treble is also tuned just better. It doesn't get kind of that overemphasized kind of sound, a little bit of sharpness in the sound that the Truthear has. So truly, I do think the variation is the logical step up and better in every way. And even the imaging is better too. The soundstage is maybe not as actually like far away sounding as the Truthear does, but the soundstage definitely, it wraps around you really well. But yeah, I hope these comparisons helps you guys out. In conclusion, I definitely recommend the Crinacle X Zero. Obviously, they have the new one that just came out. They call it the Project Red, and it's retuned. I haven't tried that out yet, but please subscribe. Maybe, I can get Crinacle to send me one or something. But yeah, I definitely recommend this product if you guys are interested in the new one. Also, I'll leave a link to that below. That one could be, a little bit better tuning, probably less trouble forward from what I've seen, and less bassy from what I've seen from the graphs. But yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.